come on in. It's our community. I'm Mary Davidson, and we have a really interesting guest. You've met her before. Her name is Sandra Moran, and Sandra is a faculty person here at Johnson County Community College, an instructor in anthropology. Mm-hmm. But in addition to the old bones, pot charts, and etc., she writes. And if you recall, we did Letters Never Sent. Well, she's writing faster than I can read. But the new book is called Nudge, and it's about religion. So I thought you might be interested in it. And to set the stage, Sandra,
yes,
I quote from you, and you say,
"It's scary. For
a long time, it seemed as though God had been silent. Religions came and went. People lived their lives, praying to the higher powers that guided their belief systems. God remained forever with humanity, watching and waiting for the day of revelation, the day when all things would come together as one. For God is all things and the overseer of all religions. I see and feel everything at the same time," said God. "It is a collective experience in which I see the boy in Israel cry. I hear the woman in Paris laugh. I taste the flavors of the earth when the man in Guatemala eats. I know the individual and collective dreams that come at night, and I hear the prayers of the faithful and the prayers of those still searching."
Yes.
Nudge.
Nudge.
And this is my book, Nudge with Notes.
It looks like you've got a lot of them.
I do.
If the Post-its are any indication.
I do. Well, the first thing is, this story is told through Sarah Shepard.
Yes.
Who is recruited with a group of wonderful people, historians of one kind or another. She is a marketing and advertising executive. And how did Sarah get to this place? First of all, it's a flashback. At the first of the book, Sarah is died.
Well, we don't know that she's died, but
she's not with us.
It sure looks like
she's not exactly squirming around.
Exactly.
Okay.
We essentially start at the end,
yes,
and then work backward, and then come back to the end, and then fill it out a little bit more.
Flesh it out.
I flesh it out a bit.
Say in the trade. Yeah. Well, how did Sarah get in this place? I mean,
Well, it should probably be noted that Sarah was an atheist, and she was very jaded, but also very lonely. And she was very single-minded in her belief that she was going to be a partner in her advertising company or agency in New York.
Bright future.
Yeah, oh, very bright future, very bright future. Even at one of the company parties, got drunk and said, you know, if I had a crack at the Bible, you know, everybody would be a Christian. And so as perhaps that part of that bravado, she was commissioned by an organization that was headed by an entity that preferred to be referred to as Infinity, and asked to come help write and market a universal addendum that would be applicable to all of the world's religious texts. All. Every one of them. And not just the religious text, but would also serve as maybe a series of guiding principles for religions that don't have actual documented texts.
Or that we don't know very well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, so there's some other characters in this book that are kind of interesting. Nathaniel is?
He is, well, without giving too much away, he is
we want to be
essentially,
careful here.
we do. He is Infinity's right hand, so to speak, and is sent with the task of commissioning Sarah, and then also ensuring that she agrees. And at first she doesn't. At first Sarah didn't want to have anything to do with this. She thought that it was, you know, ridiculous, a bunch of malarkey. But a series of things happen that really they do make her an offer that she can't refuse. And so Nathaniel is in charge of facilitating this, and then once they get her to this very remote estate, in the Hudson River Valley, which actually was the Astor estate. He's responsible for setting up her schedule, making sure she speaks with who she needs to.
And he's the go-between between Infinity and Sarah for the most part.
He is, for the first part, until then Sarah begins to meet with Infinity on her own via speakerphone.
But see, I think it's kind of interesting because not until the book of Daniel in the Old Testament were angels identified by name. And they were, in the Old Testament, go-betweens between God and, or Infinity, or whatever you want to call him or her, and go-betweens. So Nathaniel reminds me something of the unidentified angels in the Old Testament because he delivers messages back
Well,
and forth.
and as you know, there's a reason for that too.
Do you want to tell? We don't have to tell everything.
I would be inclined not to tell that.
Okay, because we want him to read the book.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
okay, that's fair. You know, I know you pretty well.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's any of Sarah in you.
I would be inclined to say there's probably a lot of Sarah in me. I constantly question. And one of the things that in my classes, I spend a tremendous amount of time talking about religion and supernatural belief. And so in researching this and crafting this book, you're going to find little bits of my lectures and little bits of me contained within it. Absolutely.
Well, and there's a phrase that you use throughout this book that I'd like to throw in front of you here.
Throw it out.
And it says, Nathaniel's talking to Sarah, and he says, the same energy, the same creative force. She has said to him something about, they were talking, and she said, well, that doesn't sound very Christian, she said to him. And he says, the same energy, the same creative force, you're going to come to realize that through this process. The same creative force, same energy flows through all religions. And what no one seems to understand is that the unifying force, the unifying concept in all of this is the act of faith. And that act of faith is a phrase that you use a lot in this book. So,
well, let me begin by saying that when I set out to write Nudge, which was incidentally not a particularly easy book to write.
No, I don't think it was.
As I set out to write Nudge, I established some rules for myself because I address a number of different religious belief systems. And so one of the first rules was that no religion was better or worse, it was just different.
And you say that in your book a number of times. Yeah.
I do, and I say it in lecture a lot. Secondly, that you have to understand that religion and supernatural is something that you cannot prove through science or reason. You simply can't prove that it's
a mystery.
It is. It is. You can't prove whether it's
not a mystery as defined as a murder, but a mystery that we all face. Much of humanity and human lives is a mystery.
Exactly. Which actually is a good lead-in to the fact that my third rule was, regardless of any religion, if you break it down, if you remove emotion from it, none of them make sense. Whether you're talking about a omnipotent, omnipresent, white guy in the sky with angel babies, or a pantheon of gods that dole out, gods and goddesses.
Thunder?
Exactly, that dole out rewards and punishments. None of them make sense. Which brings me to the next rule, which was that all of it has to be taken as a matter of faith. And the power of religion and belief really comes in that faith, because by having that faith, you're making something that you cannot prove be real.
So could I extrapolate from that you're saying that the power of religion is really the power of faith?
I think so, and I think that's probably that's one of the unifying things that you see in
so we
all
could
belief
pretty much
systems.
say they're one and the same.
You could.
I would think so.
Yeah,
I do.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Well, in order to get this addendum done, there is a whole group of people. Sarah's not the only one.
No, she's not.
And they meet in a great place. I would love to take it myself. Brooke Astor's.
The Brooke Astor estate, who...
Did you go there?
At the age of... No, but I Google mapped and Google Earthed it extensively, and I walked the grounds and did... it was actually for sale. I believe it's actually still for sale, but you could take a virtual tour. And so I printed off all of the pictures and I mapped it out. But yeah, Brooke Astor, as she actually volunteered it to the organization for this.
And I don't know, this is what I got. The group that was brought in was really basically there to help Sarah write the addendum.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about this very interesting group.
Okay. All right.
Go.
Well, you have a number of scholars and theologians.
Yes.
And they are all experts in various belief systems, but also in various times of history. Because one of the things that I tried to do, that I hope that I did effectively, was that as much as possible, I gave actual factual information. I simply added a different interpretation of these facts. And so there are some places in Nudge, which I think you pointed out, that the facts kind of perhaps slow down the story a little bit, but for people like Sarah who don't understand the paradigm at the time, you know, what was going on, it was necessary to give the story provenience. So you have Jeffrey, who is able to talk about the history of Christianity, is able to talk about the timeline with the emergence of Islamic belief. You have Fiona, you have a scholar who is versed in the Salem witch trials. You have someone who, Fiona, who is a scholar of Joan of Arc. And it becomes clear over time that the reason why you have these people who are generalists and then also people who have a specific knowledge set is because we find out that there is a mathematical trinity comprised of infinity, innumerae, and innumerae.
Okay, and let's stop right there just a minute.
All right.
Now, what is the difference? Because, you know, there's an innumerae with an I and enumerae with an E. So
they all balance each other out.
They do, but make the difference between the E and the I.
One is more than, one is less than. It's essentially tying in the, I don't want to say duality because there are 3 points, but it's everything that is, everything isn't, that isn't, and everything that could be.
Okay, well, you know, for people like me that are a little on the slow side here,
yes,
the innumerae with an E are the people that infinity has sent to make a difference, to, yes?
Well, what we find out is that innumerae was sent during the Old Testament as a nudge, someone to exact some kind of religious change. Enumerae is who we see in, at least in the Christian Bible, in the New Testament. And so as part of this, we find out that enumerae has come back as some pretty interesting characters.
Well, I was going to say they're a little more interesting because we know more about them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, well, you know, there are a lot of facts in this book. It must have taken you a long time to fact check.
It took about 6 months to research before I even sat down.
Oh, me.
And of course, I had kind of a leg up because I talk about religion in my classes, so.
But you know, one of the sentences in here, I just pick out things that kind of interest me, and one of them says, but I truly believe that we need, we're talking about Jeff now, he's one of the group that's here. He says, I truly believe we need obstacles to change and grow as a species. In fact, I would argue that it's man's fear of extinction that drives innovation. I mean, to me, the book is full of little gems that can and pretty good conversation, I think. And And then in another place you say the problems faced in the Old Testament and the New Testament are at their core the same problems we face today. And the same problems that people before them faced. We innovate and come up with ways to help us face them, and that's where religion comes into it. There again is that word, faith. And it's our job with this project to show people that, to give them hope. See, I think hope is kind of a, maybe an addendum to faith, because the ability to have faith gives you hope.
Absolutely. And when we look at religion, in my classes I don't necessarily talk about this is religion A, this is religion B, this is religion C. I talk about how, as an anthropologist, you can go about studying and comparing all religions. And to do that, you look at the emotional and cognitive functions, which are helping you understand a world that we don't understand, and emotionally having some means of feeling like you have a modicum of control. If you can pray to this entity, if you can make this sacrifice, if you can do this thing, you can exact the change that you want. But as part of that, religion also, I would argue, plays a role in helping us do the right thing, or making us do the right thing in terms of carrot or stick.
Well, having said that, let us segue into another something you said. Infinity says to Sarah, faith and belief are what we want to give people, a moral code for doing the right thing. There are many rooms in my house. You've heard that, surely. But rooms and house are inclusive in this instance. Sacrilege is a human construct. In today's vernacular, I don't judge. I don't judge, he says.
Well, and if it's all the same energy, all the same God, if we are created by this energy slash God slash whatever name you ascribe to it, then what we create is you know, a reflection of, it's all part and parcel of the same thing.
Well, and the innumeri, and we're going to talk about them in a minute, in the addendum, with an E, they have made a huge impact on humanity, each perhaps in a different way, but they're all kind of religious way. So religion is not a simple subject to discuss, truly.
No, it's not.
And then you talk about good and evil. I mean, you haven't missed anything, Sandra. You have not.
Well, I'm sure I did, but I tried really hard to. Well, and again, good and bad, black and white, yin and yang. I mean, again, it's all about this duality and balance, which is what you find with the everything and nothing. It's,
you know, and I would put this to you. Elie Wiesel says that the opposite of good is not bad. The opposite of good is indifference.
And I believe that there's a certain truth to that.
I do.
Yeah.
So I talk a little bit about infinity. You bring infinity, and he talks to Sarah weekly.
Daily,
actually. Oh, that's right, 9 o'clock every morning.
They talk every morning, 9 o'clock on speakerphone, which I thought was amusing that Infinity would utilize speakerphone, because it made me think very much of Charlie's Angels.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the explanation is that Infinity's voice is so full and so resonant that it couldn't be interpreted by the human ear. And so Infinity's not what you, I think, would expect. It's neither male nor female. It has a voice that sounds like...
But if you look at the statue of Buddha, it's hard to tell whether that's a male or a female either. I mean, the original Gautama Buddha was a male, obviously. But when you see the statues of Buddha in the temples, and many of them have lost their gender.
And Infinity is everything and again, nothing. And much more playful, I think, than one would expect. Has a fairly good sense of humor, I would argue.
Well, that's right, and you did not define Infinity as ugly, unkind, mean. Did not do that. The innumeri, that with the E, that were sent, he says, Enumeri has walked, and Enumeri you have, in the plural AE on the end, walked among you more than once, not as the second coming, but as a human being. Each Enumeri becomes a human being with the mission of nudging humanity back to the path of belief. And by that I mean all belief. And you keep talking about that. You're not, and let's just say Jesus, I'm going through my notes here.
Go ahead.
Let's just say that Jesus was the biggest nudge of all in every way possible. As for who or what he was, it's unimportant right now. And honestly, it really doesn't matter. Belief is the key.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he may have been the biggest nudge of all.
Well, and if you think about it, the irony of and again, I tried very hard to present researched, factual information with an alternative interpretation of it. But for example, Jesus never intended to start Christianity. Jesus lived and died a Jew. He was, whether you believe he was sent or just a man who had this new way, better way of being a Jew. You know, it was only when Paul got a hold of, who incidentally had never met Jesus, got a hold of it and really did a good marketing campaign, that suddenly you see.
Paul never met Jesus.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes.
And so, yeah, Jesus made a huge impact on society.
When we talk about this little group of people, there's a lot of intrigue among the people in the group. Is that intentional?
Yes.
And if so, explain yourself.
Well, what you come to find out is that there's a team that comes down or appears with every manifestation. And just like any group that has worked together for a really long time, there's a lot of infighting. And there's some jealousy, and there's some backbiting.
A microcosm of the world, perhaps?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
See, that's what I think you
Yeah,
did.
no, it's, and that is true, because you also see them approaching this from different beliefs, different belief systems with different ideas as to how this will all play out. It's hard to discuss this without giving too much away.
No, I don't want you to. That's why I didn't say anything. That's why I'm not saying more, because I want you to tell what you want to tell.
Okay.
You got to read this book. I mean, it's really interesting, and
well, hopefully
I just think there's so many interesting twists in it that you need to read it to understand, because it isn't convoluted. It's really a straight shot, but it's there are a lot of people shooting. I guess that's
that's actually a very good way of describing it. Yeah.
See,
absolutely.
I think so. I think you talk about, and this is the mathematical trinity, and she does talk about it in the book, comprised of infinity, enumeri, and innumeri. That enumeri, the entity that you claim first appeared to us as Jesus, the biggest nudge of all, and perhaps that is true, he's nudged an awful lot of us out there, has been walking among us throughout history as some pretty amazing characters.
And they are, because what you see happening is Muhammad, Joan of Arc, Martin Luther, Joseph Smith, Gandhi. You see each of these playing a very important spiritual, but I would also argue social role as well.
And philosophical.
Rebecca Nurse, one of the Salem witches, the oldest Salem witch, who was executed at, I believe, the age of 82. Shows the importance of keeping a separation between church and state. I mean, it's
And see, they all nudge us.
They do.
If we let them.
And if we think about the lessons, absolutely.
That they have to teach. Well, I am more fortunate. I have clutched to my bosom here. I have the addendum.
The actual addendum.
The actual thing, the addendum that Sarah Shepard, otherwise known as Sandra Moran, wrote.
No hubris there.
No. Well, she says in there, Sarah looked in the mirror one day and she says, "Why am I here?" And she comes to the conclusion that she's here because she's smart.
Yeah.
So that's okay. A little hubris doesn't hurt. I think that reading this addendum takes work, as you said.
It does.
Why?
It does.
Why do you think that?
Well, Sarah was charged with putting together something that was contemporary, that told the story of what infinity has been doing, what humanity may have missed over the last couple thousand years. And there is a lot of, just like any religious text, there are a lot of lessons there. Although I would argue that ultimately it comes back to that one lesson that I address at the end. Which
we don't want to say.
No,
we don't want to say.
Or Sarah addresses.
Sarah addresses in the end, and see, it's really kind of tough because we don't want to tell too much, but we want to tell you enough to get your curiosity moving.
Well, the addendum is the document that Sarah and the scholars and theologians put together, and it is broken into...
That was what she signed a contract to do.
Exactly. And it is broken into books of each of the nudges. So you have the book of Jesus, the book of Muhammad, the book of Gandhi, the book of Joseph Smith. You have, for each of the nudges,
Martin Luther,
Joan of Arc, Rebecca Nurse.
Joan of Arc and Rebecca Nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are other nudges too.
Mm-hmm.
We just, but you say this in the addendum, and I think it's a question that we need to ask us all. Why do we fear that which is different? Why do we as humans try to subjugate others? Consider the age-old debate of nature versus nurture. Who we are inherent, or are we created in such a way that we are shaped by our environment? So many questions are in here. And I think, is it the hatred and fear of that which is different, a learned behavior? If it is, that means we have the ability to change. And see, I think there are several words that we got to pull out of here. One is faith. Again. One is change. And there are others too, but those are the ones that kind of hit me. I think that it's an interesting book. Now, you have to, this comes separately from the book, yes?
Yeah, the addendum is
or am
actually
I the only person in creation that has this?
You're the only one.
No, I knew it. I knew it.
It is a companion piece to Nudge, because were I to include each and every one of the nudges, Nudge itself, the novel would have been ridiculously thick. So I put that together, or Sarah did, as a companion piece to Nudge. So once you read it, you can read the addendum and hopefully gather the message.
We could talk about this for months, but I have to say, Sandra Moran, you are wonderful, and I love reading your book. She's writing another one, so I got to quick get through this one so I can read the next one. And she says, in the end of the addendum, it says, each of you, no matter the color of your skin, your social status, or the power you choose or not to worship, is a part of a cohesive whole. Infinity says, regardless of surface differences, you are all, in my eyes, equal and precious. My hope is that someday you will understand that I see and value each of you for your differences as much as for your similarities. And indeed, God's house, or infinity's house, has many mansions. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and it's always a pleasure to welcome you into our community. I'll see you soon again.